Winning new website projects is not easy. I ran my web design agency for a decade, and in that time I sold hundreds of website projects worth millions of pounds. But when I first started, I had no experience selling websites, so it took me a long time to figure out what worked and what didn't. In this video, I'm going to share one of the most important insights that I learned. This one thing not only helped me to sell more websites, but it also helped me to better understand my clients and to win their trust. Hi, thanks for joining. If you're new to this channel, I'm Rich Dean, a web designer and developer, former web agency owner and author of the book series Start, Grow and Sell, Your Web Design Agency. My goal is to help anyone looking to start, grow and sell an agency to save time, earn more money, avoid the common mistakes and pitfalls, and build a thriving and valuable business. Okay, so before I share this insight with you, I want to tell you a story about how I discovered it in the first place. Before I started my web agency in 2014, I worked as a web designer for quite a big London agency. I was part of a big team and we deliver website projects for some big corporations and well-known brands. We're talking about websites that cost tens of thousands, sometimes hundreds of thousands of pounds. So when I left that agency to start my own business in Kent, where I live, which is outside of London, my thinking was if I can design websites for those big London clients and I've got all that experience, it shouldn't be too hard to sell websites to smaller businesses in my local area. But I was completely wrong. It was a completely different market, which looking back now was kind of obvious. I was going from working with a smaller number of very big clients to a much broader market of smaller businesses, and that tends to be the case when you move away from big cities like London. When I first started, I didn't have many clients, so one of the first things that I did was to start doing lots of networking and going out and meeting lots of people in my local business community. Many of them were business owners themselves, the exact kind of people that I wanted to work with. But from speaking with them and getting to understand their businesses, I soon realised that price was a much bigger factor with these kinds of clients. They were much more sensitive to how much things cost, and they even viewed spending a couple of grand on a new website as a lot. But it wasn't that they were frugal. Many of these business owners who would grimace at spending a couple of grand on a website would still happily spend the same or more on other things that were more personally important to them. Things like cars, holidays, TVs, home improvements. This was one of my first big challenges. How do I overcome this barrier? How do I convince people that a new website could really benefit them and their businesses? It took me a lot of time and effort and a lot of mistakes to figure out. Now, just a caveat, sometimes you can't get over this. Some people just won't want to spend a lot of money on something like a website, and that's fine. You can't work with everyone. Also, the kinds of clients that I'm talking about here are direct business owners. I did work with other types of clients like charities and internal marketers, but in the case of this one important insight that I'm going to share, it's most relevant to clients who directly own their own businesses. Just before we get into it though, please don't forget to like and subscribe as this will really help us out. Okay, so what is this big insight? Well, it's something that I started to think of as the scale of need versus want. I'm probably not the first person who thought of it, but I started to realise that with any kind of purchase, the buyer's decision is usually driven by whether they need or want something. In fact, this need or want can often be more of a factor than the actual thing that is being purchased. This makes sense. Human beings are emotional creatures, and as much as we like to think that we make logical, rational decisions, we're quite often driven more by how we feel about something. So I started to think about all of this as a scale of how much people want something versus how much they need it, and therefore where purchasing websites would sit on this scale. Most importantly, I knew that if I didn't understand this, I would waste a lot of energy and time and make a lot of mistakes trying to overcome what I thought were rational or logical barriers. But if I could figure this out, it could help me to reframe the whole website purchase so that it was more in tune with what clients actually wanted, which meant that I could sell more websites. To explain what I mean by this, let's start looking at one end of this scale, things that people need but don't want. So it's pretty fair to say that in life there will always be things that we need to purchase or pay for, but that we don't really want to. We know we need to buy car insurance, but nobody ever really wants to. We know we need to pay our taxes, but there are usually lots of other things that we'd much rather spend our money on. The main thing with all of these is that there are usually consequences if we don't pay for them. And in this case, it's those consequences that motivates us, not our desires. We know that if we didn't have car insurance, we'd be breaking the law. And we'd also lose a lot of money if we had an accident. We know that if we didn't pay our taxes, we'd also be breaking the law. We have similar expenses in business too, things like business insurance, business taxes, etc. Now, this isn't to say that these things aren't important or to do them a disservice. It's just that I think that if you ask most people, given the choice, they'd probably say that they'd rather spend their money on something else. Then at the opposite end of this scale, we have things people want but don't need. Here, we're talking about passion purchases, things people deeply desire but probably don't really need. Now, we're all guilty of this. I know I am. Some people think of it as extravagance, but these are also the things that make life worth living. Things like expensive cars and clothes, big TVs, the latest tech. Everyone's different. Everyone has their own desires, but these are the things that many people really want on an emotional level. Again, there's nothing wrong with this, but the point here is that for most of these kinds of purchases, if you really examine them, you'd probably find they're not actually necessary. We like to say that we need a new expensive car, but in reality, a cheaper or older one would probably be fine. We like to say that we need a new, bigger TV, but chances are our old one is probably still okay. The point is, there are things that we like to buy that we don't need, but that we deeply desire. And these are the kinds of purchases that are driven almost exclusively by our emotions. So if there are two ends to this scale, things that people need but don't want, and things that people want but don't need, then as you've probably already gathered, there are also purchases that are somewhere in the middle, i.e., things people don't need and don't want. These are the things that if you ask someone, they will probably say that they don't really want to spend their money on them, and there's also no real requirement for them to do so. Before we look at examples, you may be wondering then how businesses who offer these kinds of things even stay in business. And again, this isn't to do them a disservice or to say that they're not important. Actually, you'll usually find that there are whole industries that not only survive but thrive offering just these kinds of things. The important thing to realise with these kinds of purchases is that they're usually conduits or facilitators. They're usually purchased because they unlock or give access to something else. And that something else is usually the thing that someone deeply desires. That's a really important point, and it's worth remembering. I'll give you a couple of examples to explain. One is gym memberships. Now, gym memberships are really popular. I go to the gym. But if you ask someone, the gym membership itself is not the thing that they're after. It's what the gym membership gives them, usually a better physique, or better health, or confidence, or meeting new people. Another example is legal services for the purchase of a house. Again, this is not a slight at lawyers, but I think if you ask most people, they probably wouldn't have a deep desire to purchase this. But if they really want to buy their dream home, they'll need to purchase legal services to make it happen. And that's why this is a sector that always does really well and is usually very busy. In both of these examples, the thing that is being purchased is not necessarily the thing that someone wants, it's what they will unlock that's important. So, where does web design fit? Well, once I understood this, I soon realised that as much as I love web design, most clients, those business owners, don't really want a new website. And unless their current website is broken, or they absolutely need a new website just for their business to survive, there's also usually nothing that really compels them to buy one either. In fact, many of those business owners I spoke to actually view buying a new website as an expense, just another thing that they needed to purchase that if they could avoid it, they would. So, how to overcome this? Well, we need to go back to those emotional desires and understand what those clients deeply want. Most of them just want their businesses to do well so they can have a good life. If we can understand this, then we can reframe the purchase of a new website as something that will help facilitate this. Most business owners earn their incomes from the profits that their businesses make, so they will usually see anything that their business spends as meaning they will have less money in their own pockets. So, for example, if a business owner is weighing up whether to spend a few £1,000s on a new website or the same amount on an emotional purchase like a new TV, you probably won't ever win that argument if you try and compete on a logical or rational level. But if you can demonstrate that investing in a new website could help to grow their business enough that it could give them enough extra income to buy a new TV and a whole lot more, then this could be a much more effective approach. Obviously, you need to be realistic and honest about what you can achieve and not just promise something that you can't. If you have data or case studies where you can show results you've achieved for other clients, then this can show what you're capable of and what you could achieve for them. But the point is, if you can reframe the website purchase as something that could help them grow their business and benefit them personally, then this can be much more powerful than the website just being something they should have without there being any real benefit behind it. It's not even always about material things. Every client is different, and they will all have their own motivations for what they want their businesses to ultimately achieve for them. So, in closing, most clients won't ever deeply desire a new website, but if you can show them how their old website could be holding their business back and how a new one could help it to grow, and more importantly, how that will help them personally, they should start to see a new website as less of an expense and more of an investment. So, if you've enjoyed this video, then please don't forget to like and subscribe, as it really helps us out. I also discuss this and many other topics in my book series, Start, Grow and Sell Your Web Design Agency, which you can purchase from Amazon now, and I'll share a link in the description below. And if you'd like to watch more informative content, why not try this video here? Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.